Name is Daniel Burns, and today I'm covering my risk assessment project on IoT security, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So, what is IoT? Well, IoT stands for Internet of Things. It is essentially any smart device or thing that connects to the internet. It essentially is physical objects with sensors, processing ability, and tech that exchanges data with one another. So a lot of these IoT devices are light switches, outlets, bulbs, fridges, washers, dryers, smart locks, and etc. Any appliance or any device that has built-in Wi-Fi that serves a specific function, such as a task of turning a light on and off, an automation to turn on. If then this. If something occurs, control this device and do this. So essentially is, like I said, automation of things, a smart home infrastructure, which consists of enabling automation of turning lights on and off on a specific schedule, or if something occurs, then do this. And all this is driven by an assistant or a smart home hub, such as Alexa, Siri, Google Assistant, and so on and so forth. So in my home, I have a very HomeKit. I have a very HomeKit based system, so everything is essentially uh, connected through Apple's HomeKit protocol. What that means is I have many different smart devices. I have about 30 Leviton light switches around my house. Here's an example of the front light switch. And I have it automated to once something occurs, such as I have it automated where the sunset occurs at this time. So every day the sunset changes slightly based off our seasons and rotation of Earth, etc. So as the sunset occurs, turn on, and then at a specific time, like 11 o'clock at night, the device turns off. Very simple, helpful, automated task. And so as we look at these smart devices that help us, for example, they have smart grid connected devices. They help us reduce our reliability on the power grid, or reduce our reliability or stress on the power grid, for example. So we in San Diego have San Diego Gas and Electric with time of use rates, time of use times. So from the time hours of 4 to 9 p.m., electricity is the most expensive. So if you have a smart fridge that can see and connect to the internet and see the schedule, or has an agreement essentially with San Diego Gas and Electric, or you have a smart thermostat. So from the hours of 4 to 9, they can control your fridge or control your thermostat, turn it down, reduce its stress on the grid, and you get a small credit back in most cases. This is very helpful, reducing the stress on the grid and giving you a credit, the consumer. So that's one great example of a smart device. So what is the good in the Internet of Things devices? Well, like I said, they're designed to be helpful. Most name brands can be trusted. So for example, Amazon, Google, Apple, Nest, Samsung, uh, Yale, Honeywell, so on and so forth. All these devices, like Leviton, Lutron switches, um, these are most likely to be secure, fast, and oftentimes reliable, as these have dedicated teams, great amount of resources and money behind them to ensure they're reliable, fast, and secure. Now, top 10 choices have been solid choices. The top 10 companies are pretty solid. Like I said, they have dedicated teams, they have lots of backing, and they have strong security built into most protocols. They use standard protocols, protocols that are used for authentication and encryption, and ability to turn the devices on and off or produce tasks. This is very standard across most name brands. So what is the bad? The bad in these devices? Well, interoperability and compatibility. Let's say you buy a smart doorbell from one brand, or a smart outlet from one brand or a different brand. They don't use the same standard. They can't talk to each other. You use a different home hub. Or you have to have a separate app. This separate app, then you have to download on your phone, and then you give the app access to specific things such as contacts, network, etc. on your phone, and that's a whole security risk on its own. And it also becomes hard for the consumer to understand. I get confused with all these many different apps from many different smart appliances, smart devices. And So this leads you into, well, can these random devices, most likely they're knockoff Chinese brands, such as this Gobi hub, that's a Gobi outlet, smart outlet that plugs into a regular outlet, connects to Wi-Fi, and you can control a device such as a lamp. Uh, this is a knockoff version, a way cheaper version than the brand made by Waze or TP-Link, for example, of an American-based company or American-focused company. So you have this weird brand that you've never heard of. Is this, can you trust this brand? The whole idea of security, cybersecurity, Internet of Things security is trust. It's built around trust. The consumer is trusting the manufacturer to be in their best interests and secure the device from any vulnerabilities or any possible attacks. So why this leads into, why do people go cheap? Well, why should I, spend $50 on this Leviton or Lutron switch when I can spend $20 on this non-name brand switch, and it does the same exact from the consumer standpoint, does the same exact function. Well, this can be bad in terms of you don't know the manufacturer, you don't know who has access to your data, and for let's say on the camera standpoint, for buying a cheaper camera, are these recordings sent to a cloud that you can trust? Are you recording all your files, the video, is the footage, is it vulnerable? Is it accessible? Is it sent to an unknown cloud that you don't have, or they don't have a great track record? This is something to consider when buying or configuring a smart device that you don't really know about, or it's not from the top 10, top 20 brands. And also you want to make sure that, for example, Apple's HomeKit, is the processing done in the home, in the building, or is the processing done out of the home, such as Alexa's system? Is the processing done in a server? So Apple's HomeKit standpoint, you have three devices essentially: an Apple TV or a HomePod or an iPad that's always at home. Those serve as the main home hub, and they do all the processing. All notifications and automations are done on that device, and they're not done outside of your home. So is your data local or not? That's something you also want to consider. So this brings us to the ugly. Like I said, standards that or don't exist. Are they using an older Wi-Fi security standard? The latest is WPA3, where the encryption and authentication is done both on the device and on the router. Whereas WPA2 has been considered to be vulnerable now as devices transition to the next generation, the next better security. Or does this even have authentication at all? Now, also, there have been devices in the past that are unknown, weird off-brand devices that have shown that they've revealed their network credentials to attackers. This is something that is a problem. Also, speakers misinterpreting commands. For example, this isn't a problem with the hardware per se, but it's a problem with the software. Did this team or whoever made this, did they rush through it? Did they miss some things? There's always going to be something. But can you trust this smart speaker to interpret or to listen in when only you need it to listen in? Also, like I said, brandless knockoffs. There's big brand names everywhere. Most of it's made in China. It's very easy for another company to take the schematics and reproduce it way cheaper and skip a lot of the security. And so it brings us into, well, because whether or not it's a brand name or not, will they ever get security updates and patches? If you have something, a whole industry of random switches, like even at the Android level, when you have so many different versions of an Android phone, they don't usually get security patches or security updates, or very seldomly they do. So can you rely on a random company versus a well-known company to patch their device, patch the vulnerability before it becomes an issue for you and a liability for them? And then, like I said, who really has access to that device? I have a story where a client had a gate. It served a specific function or needed a specific device because most gates, often like a garage door, they function with a remote. There's a common wire and there's a communication wire. It's either open or closed. You send open, you send closed. This gate had to have three wires. So you had the common ground wire, and then you had an open signal wire and a closed signal wire. Then there wasn't really a smart device, that a Wi-Fi device that could connect to that specific gate. So this random manufacturer we found from Hungary served this function. Because it's such a rarity, we said, okay, let's give it a shot. During setup of this device, it wanted access to a specific port on the network. And this is a big no-no. You want to, from the device's perspective, sure, it's asking to open a port so its cloud service or its app can communicate with the device over the internet. Great in on paper, but from a security standpoint, if this device wants to open a port and access information outside of the home, it becomes an issue. You're allowing anyone who can see that open port to gain access to the device, to pwn the device, to use a vulnerability in that device and gain access to it. So like I said, who really has access to that device? So what to avoid? You really want to avoid unknown brands that you don't really know about, and can they be trusted? Like I said, people focus on getting cheap devices because like I said, it's cheaper. Why does it, if it serves this function, why do I have to spend more for a device that does the same thing? Also, often devices have default logins and default passwords, and these devices should be password protected, but developers should also require that users change default logins before their devices are brought online. There are many different companies, or random Chinese companies, for example, like a brand I encountered called Funlux. It's probably a different brand, also known as MeShare. It's just a random name attached to a device that's pretty much the same as a name brand device, like a Lorex security camera system, um, where when you plug the security cameras in, you hook them up, then people can see them across the internet. People can access it and have access to see anywhere where you put the cameras. It's really a privacy invasion of privacy concern. You also want to avoid young companies. Now, you have this up and coming company, really want to try their product if it's an IoT based product. Uh, we don't know if you can trust them. And because they're focused on getting the product out there, do you know if they fully focused on the security of it? They don't have a track record, a proven track record of security best practices. So you want to see how they turn out. Are they going to be around long enough? If they're a success, they're going to be able to patch the device and any vulnerabilities that occur uh, with it. And like I said, device manufacturers should severely limit debug access to their devices in order to prevent attacks like the Mirai botnet attack in 2016. This attack used a large number of IoT devices with default usernames and passwords to execute a massive distributed denial of a service attack, a DDoS attack. These devices that had default logins, they were all over the world. Gain access to them, use a vulnerability, control them, use their processing power, and then have them spoof or attack anything else around the world, a DDoS attack. You also want to make sure that devices they need to be able to be fully erased or reset. Meaning, there has been issues where if a user decommissions the device, there should be a way to wipe it clean of sensitive data like Wi-Fi password as a network information or information about the owner of the device or the previous owner. There are instances where, because the device is cheap, sometimes it's just hard coded right from the setup to put your network, your information, your personal, your name, your network name, your password, who owns the device during setup, and then it's rarely able to be easily changed or changed at all. So they just end up throwing away the device. Someone could gain access to the device that you threw away, and then see the information and possibly gain access physically to your network. And then also you want to ask yourself, do you really need a Wi-Fi enabled device? Do you really need a Wi-Fi enabled X? So I have a Bluetooth enabled toothbrush where I feel like that's okay. We're getting a little close to being ridiculous, but is able to detect if you're brushing your teeth in a certain spot and give you a report on how to improve your teeth brushing. But do you really need a toaster, for example, that connects to Wi-Fi? Do you need a back massager that connects to Wi-Fi? Sure, light switches and fridges, for example, power load shifting, great for the energy usage. But smaller, weird one-off devices or putting Wi-Fi in a device just for the sake of it, you maybe want to avoid that until we get to a future where um, devices can self-diagnose and alert you. That's not necessarily the case now. So what's the solution? A consumer solution. Well, we want to decide on a standard. We want established protocols that have been around for a while and they're we know about them and they're very secure, or at least they're an industry standard that can be improved upon pretty rapidly. Plain old Wi-Fi. These are protocols here. Plain old Wi-Fi, Matter, for example, Thread, Zigbee, Z-Wave. These are examples of protocols of communication for these devices. So CSA, the Connectivity Standards Alliance, along with partnered along with all the major brands such as Apple and Google and Amazon to create a sort of standards alliance called Matter. Then all the devices can communicate with each other. Um, it makes it easier for security patches and communication to occur without having all these segmented weird standards and protocols that make it harder for devices to be serviced or upgraded or secured. Also, it helps with two things: the environment, so you're not throwing away devices um, because the standard doesn't exist anymore, or it's an old standard. Let's say, for example, if Matter can stay around for a really long time, the device can be at least upgraded or patched or stay connected in a way that you still have functionality to the device. And then secondly, security. Security updates are still going to be a thing for the device. One thing that I want to focus on, or two things, is essentially security on the router level and then a separated Wi-Fi network. So security on the router level, meaning just like iOS has this trust none, allow as needed, make this a main feature on Wi-Fi networks or Wi-Fi routers today. Most Wi-Fi routers have great processing ability. They have the RAM. These smart mesh networks are getting very, very advanced, very fast. So with an update, for example, this could be pushed out to even current devices. Doesn't have to be in the future. Of course, future devices, future routers should have this functionality. So, for example, you use your app to set up your mesh network or your Wi-Fi router. This same app can then alert you to ask you, do you want to give access? Do you want to give A access to B? And then you yourself have been given the choice to make sure that that connection is either allowed or denied. And then, for example, on the next thing for the separated Wi-Fi network, we want uh, essentially a Wi-Fi network just for uh, Internet of Things devices that's separated completely from your personal devices. Now, it's great if you can put it on a guest network, although the devices can still see each other, your data is intermixed. This is where a VLAN, a virtual LAN, comes in place, where you have two different LANs on the same network virtually, and the devices cannot communicate with each other. So let's say I'm going to bring up this diagram right here. This is a very crude example of a VLAN. So your internet coming in, and then you have your main router, and then they are separated where all your personal devices, your PC, your phone, your network attached storage with all your personal data is on one VLAN, your personal network. And then on the other VLAN, VLAN 2, network 2, you want to call it, is your IoT devices, your smart plug, your webcam, your door lock, your fridge, whatever, so on and so forth. Things that can communicate through the cloud, can communicate through their dedicated service or dedicated protocol securely, and it is not needed for the smart plug, for example, to connect with your NAS. So this prevents access. So if a smart device, if smart plug becomes if the smart plug has a vulnerability, it's attacked, it has an open port, whatever, someone can gain access to it, make this device, um, then take over this device, and then this device can then access your NAS, your phone, your PC, get access to your personal data, or use it in an attack to see what else is on your network. Now, if this would be separated in a VLAN, that smart plug does not see your network with your personal devices. It only sees all the other smart devices, which thankfully, if they're all from a name brand or big brands, they have their own security protocols. They're more secure. So this becomes a mute point, a one-off device. This device stops working, you throw it away. Hopefully that's the case with having two separate networks. So your compromised device, your compromised smart plug, does not gain access to your personal data, for example. So in my home, for example, I have this advanced enterprise prosumer level setup, where you have a modem and a switch, and this switch can do this VLAN, set it up, and separate your two networks, where all the light switches are connected to one Wi-Fi network, and then your personal devices are connected to your personal Wi-Fi network. This is great and all for people, nerds like me, who can set this up without ease, but being able to do this on the consumer level, to be able to have, so consumers can do this with a tick of a box, is essential for the security standards, the security of Internet of Things devices, your personal files, your personal information to be secure. So who enforces this? Well, there's two major alliances, just like the alliance that created Matter, CSA, the Connectivity Standards Alliance. They have a CSA IoT specific section ensuring that this is a solution moving forward, and I suggest that they should enforce this and make this a standard across all Wi-Fi routers. And then, of course, the Wi-Fi Alliance, you can't forget them. They control everything from labeling the speeds and the standards, Wi-Fi 5, Wi-Fi 6, Wi-Fi 6E, so on and so forth. They can be the ones to work with the CSA to ensure that this becomes a standard across Wi-Fi routers, ensuring that we have the separated network just for IoT devices, and trust none, allow as needed. We also want to make sure that these smart devices are encrypted. Data should be encrypted both at rest and in transit. And having these smart devices do this is critical to the security and of your personal information. So looking forward, we have a super connected future ahead of us. I mean, it already is now. We should encounter devices that are self-diagnosing devices and routers that figure out, oh, there's a problem. I'm going to alert someone, or maybe I'm going to fix myself, or maybe I'm just going to stop working to ensure that it doesn't become rogue or compromised. So, for example, there's a next-gen firewall in the enterprise level of networking. These next-gen firewalls cover things at the layer 3 or the application layer. They can specifically see data down to the byte of what's being used where, what's being sent where, who's using it, really critical down to the fine detail of information. So as these consumer routers get smarter, more powerful, because they're functioning as people are getting gigabit at their home, they need to be more powerful. People are having multiple routers to decide where devices connect to and when. They have the extra processing power, or you can add the extra processing power at a very relative cheap pace, cheap rate, as memory and processors are pretty cheap for this level of processing in the consumer router. So the router can figure out, oh, there's something weird going on here. I'm going to alert my user, or I'm going to say, I automatically block that threat. I have a built-in threat detection, threat prevention protocol. And so Also looking forward, only the most common brands will survive, meaning the big brands that have a dedicated team, dedicated security patching protocol, they can see this before it becomes a liability for them and a liability for you, an issue for you. This moving forward, only top brands will survive. Just like big brands buy each other up, or some cheaper brands, such as these Chinese knockoff brands, you can't rely on them. They're not going to be around moving forward. So trust, spend the extra money, and trust more common name brands in the industry. And then lastly, updates, updates, updates. Meaning, like I said, common name brands will focus on securing your device, sending out patches as soon as they can, ensuring your information is secure and vulnerabilities are patched. So moving forward in IoT security, we want to make sure that devices have their own network, own dedicated virtual LAN. This becomes a standard across all Wi-Fi routers. You can tick a box, or it's automatically set up so devices, smart devices, connect to a dedicated network. And then trust none, allow as needed. This is very critical in ensuring that the consumer has the choice when it comes to allowing a service or a device to access a service or open a port on your network. You do not want rogue vulnerabilities popping up everywhere because uh, your device decided to connect to this random service. And so moving forward, security is everything. Trust the brands that survive the longest and trust the brands that will give you the best security. And that's the best thing the consumer can do right now uh, as protocols get more secure, get more advanced, and these IoT Internet of Things grows even larger to God knows what in any of our devices in our home and our offices. So hopefully this enlightened you, gave you some good information on the current state of IoT technology, IoT security, and what we need to do moving forward. Thank you and have a great day.